what I did then was to take these pieces of paper, scan them into the computer, and resize them. And I had to play with the scale a little bit in order to find the scale that I wanted. And it's simply a matter of just playing with percentages and seeing how big you want it. I wanted the finished quilt to be around 48 to 50 inches. I wanted her to be pretty big, but not huge. And then, of course, I added the borders, and now she is pretty big. So whenever you resize, make sure you resize both sets of your designs to the same scale. Then print out the whole thing. This is the printed version of all the interlocking lines. And you tape it all together, and you can see it's kind of messy and it's difficult to use, and I'm actually going to probably end up throwing that away after this video. It's not easy to use that version of it, so I always then create all these pieces of paper. I know it looks wasteful, but it's really not. It could be a lot worse. I then create another copy of it. Nice thinner lines, and this is 2 big pieces of 1-inch graph paper. My favorite paper. Using a light box, I transfer this, but really the paper's so thin that you could probably transfer it without a light box just fine. I will save those for future quilts in case I decide to break up a circle this way again, which chances are it probably will. I love working with circles. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. They draw the eye. And then breaking the circle up into rays is also very effective. Now you might be wondering about the black side of the quilt, and why didn't I go ahead and create a quilting design for that side? Well, the reason for that is that it was much smaller scale. The rays are pretty big, and I could get pretty precise even with the tight areas of those rays because they weren't likely to be used because the goddess is in the place of the small areas. But with the background here and the gray yin-yang area, I decided that I would just simply create kind of a grid, and this is doubled left turn, right turn, which is a filler design, and so I just took the filler design and doubled it so that way I could do it with Trapunto and make all of those lines puffy. And so I just created this grid, laid the grid behind the quilt, and transferred the lines using the light box again. And so this is one of the designs that waited until the quilting process to be finished, but I knew and I had a plan for what I was going to do. So it's not like I waited till the piecing process to even think about it. I actually knew what I was doing. And then, of course, the hash mark grid on her body was transferred using a grid stencil. Very simple. So that is the basic steps to putting a quilt together like this, to designing it. Yes, it looks like there's a lot of paper involved, but if you think about it, templates and traditional quilts require quite a lot of work as far as the math of them in order to not need all the paper. But in my opinion, my personal opinion, is that the end result is well worth it, and I don't mind the little bit of waste. That's why I buy the paper. You know, that's why I buy the tracing vellum. So I use it to produce beautiful quilts. So that was the basics of how I designed the quilt itself. I did use a method called applique, and I have had a lot of questions about this. This is a technique developed by Sharon Chamber. And I have had quite a few people ask about it and kind of which tutorial was the best of hers. I learned this technique from her Quilt Fairy video, which is excellent. And it will kind of get you started on understanding all the preparation that's needed in order to put the quilt together. And real basically, it's preparing the fabric in a way that's traditional to applique. But instead of appliquing the pieces on top of one another, you actually take it to your sewing machine and stitch them together. So it's applique and piecing kind of mixed together. You then pop the seams open and press them, and you get a nice flat pieced curved seam. So it's just like a regular piece seam. It's pretty precise. The only area that I really struggled with was her hands, because you've got the black yin-yang coming down, and her hands then kind of fit into it from the borders. And there were a lot of little itsy bitsy pieces that kind of came together and I think applique, this is just my personal opinion, but I think applique works better when all the pieces are roughly the same size. So if they're big, they're all fairly big. and they're not big and small all kind of jumbled up together. So there were some small pieces with that hand area, and that's why I think I struggled with it just a little bit. I did manage to get it together and all of the seams matched, so I was really tickled with that. But the black yin-yang section, I couldn't figure out how to actually piece that section, so I appliqued it on top of the quilt. Her head and her heart are also appliqued onto the surface, rather than actually pieced into the quilt itself. And applique with that is very simple, just simply turn under the edges, and then I stitched it with a smoke colored thread in order to blend it in with the smoke kind of grayish color of the yin yang. So that was the basics of getting it together. So now I'm going to flip the quilt over and allow you to see all of these motifs that I have now clipped out and finished clipping in Trapunto. So there you have it. This is the effect of a really well-designed, well-thought-out quilting design. I clipped all of this batting away. This is simply white polyester batting that I put on the back of the quilt, kind of sandwiched it with pens, basting pens, stitched it with water-soluble thread, and both the top and the bobbin. You have to use water-soluble thread because the thread is just a placeholder. You're just holding the batting in place long enough to clip it and then get it basted a second time. So this is all of the clipping that's been done, and you can definitely see the textures that I've created from one side of the yin-yang to the other. And you can see the effect of these big rays that are just bursting forth from the center of the quilt. I am extremely excited about quilting this, and I can't wait to get started. So the clipping is done. I'm off to go baste this quilt and get it ready for free motion quilting.